Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay. In early March, Ali Hashem, reporter for the Arabic Al Jazeera channel, resigned in protest over Al Jazeera's coverage of Syria and also expressed concerns over their coverage of Bahrain. And in part one of our interview, he told the story of the resignation and what some of his concerns were. And he joins us again to continue our discussion. Thanks again for joining us, Ali.
You're welcome.
So just to remind everybody, Ali joins us from Beirut, and he was a reporter for Arabic Al Jazeera. Before that, he worked with BBC and Manar TV. So Ali, let's pick up our discussion. We were just beginning to talk about Libya. How do you assess Al Jazeera's coverage of Libya, the Libyan conflict?
Actually, I was one of the main reporters in the Libyan conflict. We started the coverage from the beginning of the revolution in Libya, and we were witnessing the turning points in this revolution, how it was, how it turned into how it was militarized, and how the NATO started striking the Gaddafi posts, and so regarding Al Jazeera's coverage, it was supportive of the revolutionists and certainly anti-Gaddafi, but at that time it wasn't. Things were kind of being experienced one by one. It was a first-hand experience at that time. We were just going into cities along with the rebels. We go into the city along with the rebels, and then it's kind of we go live on air, and it was kind of all the concentration was on Libya. Regarding the coverage, I mean the journalistic coverage, taking for example the two points of views. Actually, that might have been maybe not the same as Al Jazeera used to do before, when it was giving all the factions and each and every party in any conflict. It was giving them the right amount of time. It was clear that Al Jazeera was adopting the rebels' stance. It was going strongly behind them so that they prevail at the end. Then the Qatari agenda was clear. Actually, going day after day, it was clear that the Qataris were really taking it as a personal issue with Gaddafi, and they want him to fall. Whatever. Certainly, this was welcomed by everyone over there, and even outside, because Gaddafi wasn't that kind of a loved leader for his people, neither for the countries around him. And at the same time, there were no really strong allies of Gaddafi to defend him in front, or facing the Qatari media machine, or the Americans, or the French. The international coalition that was really formed to face the Gaddafi regime.
How soon after the very first protest that broke out in Benghazi, how soon after that were you there?
I was in Libya by the 8th of March. That was like 20 days. My colleagues were there by the 1st of March. That was like 13 days. So we tried our best to be there as soon as possible. And we were moving from one, as I told you, we were moving from a city to city with the rebels. They were discovering some cities with us. They were just, as they say, liberating these cities, and we were along with them, going from there, from each place to another. We entered from Egypt, and we had our own machines with us, SNGs, those live stream boxes, whatever. So they were all with us, and we were trying our best, in each city or each place we go to have live coverages from there, and make people talk what they have, right. Because those people were for like 42 years, being muted, if it's
now.
A
lot of people have compared the Syrian situation to the Libyan situation in a few ways, but that in Libya, that one take on this issue is that it began either with peaceful protests that were very early on militarized, again, to some extent by outside forces. Some people think it was the French or the Americans' involvement. Yeah. Or some people are suggesting even further that the whole thing begins in Benghazi as kinds of an external conspiracy of sorts. What did you make of that?
Let me be clear. My own point of view in this regard, regarding even the Syrian, the Libyan, all the revolutions that took place in the Arab world, they're not set up. They're not staged revolutions. Those revolutions were because there are reasons for such revolutions. In each country, there is a reason. There is a tyrant. There is a dictatorship. There are regimes that are really very old, and that's why people are revoluting. It's not because those people are really being pushed by outside to revolute, but it's people, whenever you have enemies, then you should take in consideration that your enemy is going to make use of any revolution against you. So I'm not going to expect that enemies of Gaddafi or Al-Assad will stay, calm when they're seeing their enemy falling down, or at least someone who is standing for him. For sure, they're going to support them. Now, for example, the Wall Street Occupy Wall Street movement that was going on in the States. If let's say there is someone, any country that was really that really wants to annoy the United States, wouldn't they go and support those people against the regime of the United States?
Actually, we do see that, because Russia today is very, very supportive of Occupy Wall Street.
That's why that's normal. It's I'll just say that everyone has the right to do whatever he wants. I can't say that this can do that, but those revolutions started peacefully. Those people started, went into the streets because they were really oppressed for 40 years, or 42 years, or 30 years, or 35 years. It depends on which country. You're talking about an Arab world and the pro-American regimes that were really backed by the American administration, and most of those regimes were dictators. And still, you have dictatorships. You have kingdoms like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is really doing a lot of oppression for the people. The same for Bahrain. And these regimes are really backed by the United States till the bones.
Well, let's go back to the beginning days of the Libyan conflict.
Yeah.
Do you think, in terms of how quickly the protests became militarized? I mean, obviously the threats of Gaddafi are the underlying issue, but did it get militarized more quickly than it might have because of external factors? Actually,
in Libya, the beginning of the revolution and the real start of the revolution is when the rebels, or let's say the activists at that time, occupied the barracks in Benghazi, and they went inside and took all the weapons, and then it started. Everyone had weapons, and everyone was kind of fighting from that time. So, and then it was clear that the French were really pushing into the militarization of the revolution. Then you have the United Nations Security Council resolution. So it was kind of there was the international community had a consensus over militarization of the revolution in Libya, and there was no one saying no. No one was, except for the Russians maybe, and then they just stopped saying anything after some time. Even the Turks were having stances that were objecting all kinds of militarization, and they were calling for political accord to be reached and negotiations, whatever. And that was really for those in Benghazi, that was really provocative for them, and they refused several times to receive Turkish aids and Turkish even people who were coming to negotiate with the National Council over there for this political negotiations with Gaddafi. I mean, so they were trying to be different. So this was in Libya. It was quick, and everyone was doing whatever. But you should take in consideration that Libya is a country different from Syria, as Egypt is different from Tunis.
The criticism of Al Jazeera really got serious over Libya. And it was particularly when you started to, fairly early on, and a lot of people predicted this right from the beginning, that after the UN resolution and Benghazi, it very quickly turned into really an agenda of regime change, and Qatar was clearly, one of the leading voices calling for regime change. How did that affect Al Jazeera's coverage?
For sure, but at the end we were dealt with by the rebels over there as heroes, because we were Al Jazeera, that is really owned by Qatar, which is taking those stances that are really kind of supportive of the NATO strikes, supportive of the rebels, giving arms to the rebels. So that was really clear that we were doing media warfare. As for me, I was trying my best, and that was clear on air, and that gave me a lot of problems with people on the ground. That I was trying my best to be unbiased and giving the picture as it is. But the problem is, in general, the channel was taking this route or this path. And I won't lie and say I wasn't happy with that. That was okay, Everyone was kind of Gaddafi should fall, and that was normal for anyone. And I wrote that in the newspaper that we felt like it's okay that Gaddafi should fall. But after that, everyone started, thinking, and after that, what is going to happen? Now that journalism is laid aside, what are we going to do now? It's kind of politicization of media, and now we are working for political agendas rather than working for a journalistic or for a media outlet.
All right. In the next segment of our interview, we'll talk more about the conflicts in the Middle East, and particularly about Bahrain. Please join us for the next segment of our interview with Ali Hashem.